So one of the challenges I think we've talked about is the kind of veracity of the source and whether or not you can necessarily trust, or is it possibly being dubbed or changed in some way. Are there other challenges to teaching with YouTube that you found?
Yeah, and I'm going to couch this challenge. I'm really bad at not answering. I mean, I think I'm answering your questions.
No, you definitely
are.
Going
around
it.
Great. Is that example? Your question kind of. There's a certain problem which is also an opportunity. Okay, so one of the things of media studies that we like to study is kind of this classic model of you have media production, media text, and media reception. All right, and it's very difficult. So we can do entire books on what HBO's The Wire is all about, but we don't really know how people are receiving it. With YouTube, it's super exciting because not only do you have comments, sometimes 10 comments, sometimes 10,000 comments, which give you a whole range of kind of media audience, not systematic, not scientific, but really interesting feedback. But you also have video responses, so you're able to do that stuff. Now, for me as a media scholar, I love that opportunity because I see a media text and media reception in one, and it's such a great corpus to study, a media corpus to study. At the same time, you have all those things. This video is shitty, right? And that's really calm. And when you start getting the incredibly racist, incredibly homophobic and sexist and violent comments, it's difficult, And I'm not saying that teaching media studies, I don't get involved in media texts that aren't racist, sexist, homophobic and stuff, but to have the kind of the vile that we see in some of these comments is disconcerting. At the same time, I always use that as an opportunity because if my students are going to go into being journalists, being media makers, they're going to have to get used to making their media, making it public, and getting ready for really obnoxious comments all over the place. And so, at the same time, if I'm showing a video or reading some comments and Father Prevet comes into the classroom, he sees some of the comments, I would be a little embarrassed. I think that he would completely understand what we're doing, but there's an element of vulnerability. When I assign a paper, when I assign a newspaper, I kind of either know what they're going to be reading or viewing, or I know that the quality of the newspaper is going to cover stuff. Same with films, video, etc. When I assign something like YouTube, there's a vulnerability that I like, but it always makes me nervous. It really does make me nervous.
Well, I think it touches on something. We were lucky enough to be able to see Gavin Newsom interview Steve Chen, the founder and I guess CEO of YouTube in a city lecture series that they do at the main library. And one of the things what they were specifically talking about was YouTube in the age of politics, and in where we are specifically right now at the verge of this huge election that could potentially put the first African American into office, and the way in which the debates were structured using YouTube questions, and the way that YouTube is changing the face of politics. And one of the really interesting things that we all kind of jumped on was when Steve Chen talked about the democratization that's happening in politics, and specifically because of the medium of YouTube. And I'm just curious to know, what you were saying about the comments. It's kind of the same thing. Anybody can create a screen name on YouTube and make a comment, whether it's inflammatory or intelligent and well thought out or not. In the same way, anybody can upload a video onto YouTube. So I'm curious to know if you have any thoughts in general about kind of the censorship, the availability, whether or not there's any sort of and I'm sure you get this in your kind of pop cultural media studies text all the time, whether or not there's kind of a dumbing down of our culture that's happening because of YouTube, or if you think it's just in general something that's happening.
I mean, it's tough. That's kind of like the $1,000,000 question we're all kind of trying to figure out, and it's the one that occupies most of our time, I think. My first answer is the most exciting thing around. I mean, I love it, and we just finished, like I said, we just finished 2 weeks of 1984, and we're talking about where everyone has a telescreen and there's total, utter surveillance society of all time. There's one channel that beams into your room. And my students and I had a really interesting conversation about, could you have 1984 during an age of YouTube, where everyone's potentially the producers, and so it's not just Big Brother doing one channel for one audience, it is many people doing many videos for many people, and then we redistribute, mash up, and distribute them all around. So that to me is incredibly exciting, and every time, I mean, I've been studying the internet enough to know that every 5 years we have this utopian moment, the internet's going to do everything, and we're having one again with Web 2.0. I think there's still so many problems, but that element of a radically redistributed, decentered medium tool of distribution is incredible. I love it. That said, there are a lot of problems, and I think that there is kind of a dumbing down of I mean, one of the problems is really kind of the problem with human nature. We're interested in really trivial, silly stuff, and so if we, you know, the idea was, well, if we give the tools of production to the hands of everyone, what will they produce? Well, like silly cat videos, you know. And so that's the key. And so that's kind of a problem. At the same time, I don't think that we should spend all of our time reading Shakespeare or watching Citizen Kane on YouTube. The political problem, I'm really at odds with that. On one side, I think it's so exciting, and I'll let my own politics, I'll betray my own politics. I mean, I think someone like John McCain just simply can't have an election during YouTube. He's supposed to be a straight talker, but he's realized it. We realized this with Warner and the macaca moment, is that the straight talker is the person who's going to say a lot of dumb stuff. And you could always do that, especially if you're really close with the media and a centralized media. You could always do that. In an age of YouTube, when everyone has a camera sitting around, it's only one mistake and you're gone. And so I'm kind of at odds with that, because on one side, I don't think anyone can be a politician or be on their game 24/7. Somehow Obama is, I don't know how. But at the same time, I don't think they should be expected to do that. I really like when people make mistakes, and I really like when people make mistakes and say, you know, come to think of it, I may have said something wrong there. Let me back up and let me actually retract that. And it feels like right now what everyone's looking for is that macaca moment. And I feel that just as television, you know, the famous example is Lincoln was debating someone, I think, for 3 or 4 days. And now with television, we have these 2-hour, 3-hour debates. Then with modern television, we have these 15-second clips, right? So our sound bites are going down, down, down. Now the sound bite is macaca, just that, one mistake. And I think that that's really bad for rigorous political debate and political discourse. At the same time, and this is the last part, sorry,
no, it's fine.
is that I feel that all of us have been to a rally, or all of us have seen an unedited footage of someone, and you can't believe what they're saying, you're amazed, and then you go to CNN or New York Times or ABC News, and it's not even there. And you always wonder, and I always tell my students that, you know, at what point did that get cut off? Did the journalist cut it off? Did the editor, did the publisher, did the stakeholders cut it off? Why aren't we seeing this? And I think with YouTube, we're getting a lot more news, and I think that's quite exciting. You know, I think it's really exciting.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point that you made about, you know, kind of the good and the bad. I think it's really interesting, this idea that we expect our politicians to be on and ready and accountable 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When, I mean, you know, it's kind of encouraging our politicians in some way, even to you know, to move towards a very false exterior, because they know that they're always there. And in the same way, you know, I mean, you know, Gavin Newsom's yelling at it, not yelling. Well, yes, he's yelling. He's yelling at a crowd who are so excited because of the Supreme Court decision. He just happens to be Mike. You know, this is Howard Lee moment, and there it goes, and it's done. You know, and now he's the face of Yes on 8. So, yeah, it's a really interesting. It's an interesting topic, and it's something that I think there's going to be a lot of talk about in academic circles and stuff.